Good morning, everyone.
Good morning,
I love that. I am so happy to see everyone gathered together today, and I'm sure you can assume that if we're all together in McDowell right now, that something special is going to happen. And that special thing that's going to happen is a conversation and a presentation with our very special guest. I want to introduce you to Paul Muldoon, and he is a poet. Annika, you're getting right in there. What is it, sweetie?
My mom has a book of his poetry.
My heavens, she's probably one of the very few people in the world who has a book of my poems. But I'm delighted to hear that.
I'm so glad that Annika just raised her hand to make that comment because we're looking for questions from all of you when that time comes, and we'll make this a conversation in which all of us can learn about poetry. We will learn about Paul's childhood in Ireland and how he became a poet, and also what poetry is and what it can do and how it can make you feel. And Eric, I already noticed that you were reading the poem that's been handed out. I'm going to ask you guys, for the time being, can you put your poems under your seats? And when it comes time, we'll let you know and you should pick them up again. Thank you so much. Okay. So does anyone want to raise a quiet hand and tell me what you think poetry is? What's a poem? Veronica.
A poem is something that most of them have rhymes in, and a poem is a poetry.
Mm-hmm. So poems can often rhyme. One more suggestion? Katya.
Poems are like a soft, rhyming song.
Yeah, well, these are fabulous. These are fabulous. Yes?
They also, instead of rhyming at the end, they rhyme at the front.
Some of them do, I think. So rhyme is something that there'll be loads of time, by the way, for each of you to get involved and ask another question or make another point, make another comment. But since rhyme has been raised as a concept here by several of you, what is it about rhyme that you enjoy? First of all, how would you define rhyme?
If they have, what does define mean?
Define means how would you describe it?
Two things that sound the same.
Two things that sound the same. That's absolutely right. So there's this little chime. There's a connection between these two sounds. And it's something that we're all fascinated by. It's something that we all love, actually, and we love it from the time we're even younger than you are. We love that sense of finding connection in the world. What are some of your favorite rhymes?
Well, they could go into books and I don't really know any rhymes.
Well, what would be a rhyme, for example?
Dime. Cat and hat.
Dime. What else?
Day.
What else are the rhymes?
Rhyme.
Yeah, a rhyme for rhyme itself.
Sam?
Mime.
Mime. That's a good one.
Lion.
Dime, mime. How
What
about one
else?
that starts with
Chime.
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 What about slime?
Slime. Lime. Lime.
So these connections in the world make us extremely happy as when we're young, and indeed as we continue. Go ahead. What did you want to say? Anyone else?
I'm wondering, do poems always rhyme?
They don't, and in fact, there are for many poets these days, as we come into the, where are we here? The 21st century, right? 21st century. For many poets, there's a feeling that rhyme is very old-fashioned and, in fact, is totally inappropriate in the modern world. Whereas, in fact, and that it's an imposition on the language, right? It's sort of imposed, set upon the language, rather than arising naturally. For some of us, we're still actually interested in the impact of rhyme, you know? So most of my poems actually rhyme, sometimes a little strangely. Yes? What would you like to say?
Like you can like write something like 10 and time.
Ah!
Rhyme.
That's a very sophisticated rhyme. That's a really great rhyme. Did you hear what it was? So we have the slime, mime, dime, and then we have time. But here's a very particular kind of rhyme with time, and that's Tim, right? Now it's not a full rhyme, it's a kind of half rhyme. And it's a very effective device.
Time and rhyme?
What is it?
Time and rhyme.
Time and rhyme is also a rhyme, actually. The term rhyme can cover a huge amount of territory. But Tim and time is a very sophisticated rhyme. Very good, excellent.
That's like, we might call that alliteration.
Well, it is alliteration, but the T sounds, but it's the Tim time. It's the half rhyme. Tim, time, Tom, tomb. Those are all rhymes, right?
I've got two things to say. I made up my own like day, May, and also lime rhymes with time.
It sure does. So listen, this impulse to rhyme is really central to us. It's something that's very much at our core, and it's still at the heart of many poems. It's not the only aspect of poetry. What else might we say about poetry? How would you define it? How would you describe it? Yes?
Leg and Lego.
Did you say like and Lego?
Leg and Lego.
Leg and Lego as a rhyme? That is excellent. That's an excellent rhyme. But here's what I want to talk to you about that you've just brought up naturally, is the word Lego. Do you use Lego? Do you play with Lego?
Yeah, at home.
At home. So what does Lego involve?
Metal.
What does it mean? What is Lego? What do you do when you play Lego?
You build stuff.
You build stuff. Okay, so building stuff is actually at the heart of writing poetry. The word poem means something that's built in the world, something that's constructed in the world, something that's made in the world.
Like building.
Like a building. So a poet is a builder, right? And the poem is a building. At least this is one very useful way of thinking about it. And it's made up of all these components, like Lego, right? And you take a piece and you put it with another piece and then another piece. And at the end of the day, you've got a big tower. And what's the key to your big tower? There's one thing you don't want to happen to that tower when you build it.
It falls.
You don't want it to fall.
Or break.
Or break. And that is at the heart of the business of writing poems. You want to write something that's going to keep, right? That's going to stay intact. That's going to last for a while. Same as in Lego. Okay? So what else? We've got the Lego business. What else would you say about poetry?
Well, I'm wondering.
Dale.
So I think our oldest children here, is anyone 8 years old in the back yet? Yes, we've got some 8-year-olds here. I'm wondering, how old were you when you wrote your first poem?
Well, I think I was probably around your age. Now that doesn't mean that you can't start earlier, but I think 8-year-olds are actually among the best poets. And I often quote a poem written by an 8-year-old in Ireland, where I'm from. And here's the poem. Are you ready? It's a poem called The Tortoise. Are you all familiar with the tortoise?
Yeah.
The tortoise?
I'm familiar with it.
You're familiar with it, thank heavens for that. You're not familiar with it. Well, the tortoise is it's an animal with a shell, a hard shell on either side, right? A tortoise, right? It looks a bit like a turtle, but they're probably.
I know what
You want?
I know what
tortoise. Okay, so here's the poem, The Tortoise. Are you ready?
Yes.
Stand by. The tortoise goes movie, movie. You're wondering, what? What sort of a poem is that? That's the entire poem. What do you think of it? As a description of a tortoise. What do you say? You know, brevity is a fine thing in most areas of life. And one of the reasons why we go into the poetry business quite often is because we admire brevity. And one of the reasons why I went into it was because, do you guys have to write essays at all, or are you a bit young for that? Do you write papers?
My mom is a teacher at university, and she teaches how to write essays.
There you go. And so writing essays is something I did. You'll do it when you're a bit older, but I just hated writing essays and writing papers. So I wanted to do something that was short, and I thought that writing a poem was at least short, right? So it's very short. Do you want me? So the tortoise goes movie, movie. Now that word M-O-V-I-E, or maybe it's M-O-V-E-Y. Movie, movie. Have any of you seen that word? Movie? It's not talking about a... You once saw it? Yeah, it sounds a bit like the word movie when we go to the films. We go to the picture house to see.
Oh yeah, like theater.
Like a theatre, that's right. But this is M-O-V-E-Y. It's not really a word we see all that often. But listen, here's the question. As a description of a tortoise, what's the thing about a tortoise? What's the thing about...
They're slow.
They're slow. That's absolutely right. But here's the thing. As a way of describing an animal that moves slowly, you can't really do better than the tortoise goes movie, movie. Because you can see it sort of in its hesitancy, you know, it's barely able to put one foot past the other. So in other words, that was a poem written by an 8-year-old. And it's something that's unexpected, right? You've never seen a tortoise described in that way. And that's the key to writing poetry, is to come up with something that you haven't quite seen before. And as I say, 8-year-old, you guys are in your prime. You're in the prime of life when it comes to poetry. Right? Prime, lime, time. There's another one. Yeah, tell you what, should we read a poem?
Yeah.
Should we read one poem? I think you've got a poem under your seat.
I think. Should we listen first?
Yeah, well, let's get it out. Yeah.
Label.
Why Brownlee left and where he went is a mystery even now. For if a man should have been content, it was him. 2 acres of barley, 1 of potatoes, bless you, 4 bullocks, a milker, a slated farmhouse. He was last seen going out to plough on a March morning bright and early. By noon, Brownlee was famous. They had found all abandoned, with the last rig unbroken, his pair of black horses, like man and wife, shifting their weight from foot to foot and gazing into the future. What images do you get from that? What do you see in that poem? Yes?
I see a stable with 2 black horses.
Yes. You see a stable. Okay, that's one view. Yes, and then?
I see 2 footsteps walking one by one.
Yes. What else? What? Yes. What else?
I see a fancy parade.
A fancy what?
Parade.
A fancy parade. Yes.
Went and content rhyme.
Ah, well spotted. Now, have any of you ever seen a field being ploughed?
Some no.
Yes? Where have you seen that?
One time I was walking
Out in the rural districts, right? Out in the countryside, they plough the land. Usually these days with a tractor, but of course in the olden days it would have been with a horse or a couple of horses, which was what we're looking at here. Somebody mentioned how went and content rhymed.
I did.
Yes. Any other rhymes in the poem? Yes.
Let me look.
I want to remind you of this rhyme that was spotted earlier on, which was time and what? Tim. Time and Tim. Do you remember that rhyme?
I do.
Time and Tim. So the rhymes in this are a bit more along those lines.
It wasn't time.
What was it?
It was time and dip.
And what?
Time and dip. Oh, wait. Time and dip.
Do you remember we were admiring it as a kind of half rhyme? I think
It was time and Tim.
Time and Tim, it was yourself. So can you see any examples of Time and Tim, that kind of rhyme in this poem? For example, can you see a rhyme that for barley that is more like the Time Tim? You see another word further down the page that might rhyme with barley. Let's look at all the possibilities. There's bullocks, farmhouse, plough, early. Early.
Good job, Lulu.
Okay? So early and barley rhyme. Now it's not a conventional rhyme, right? It's not barley, marley, early, fairly would be a much more conventional rhyme. So often these days poets writing in English use these half rhymes. Let's see. No, not. So what about farmhouse? Any rhymes for that? In the Tim time mode. Let's see, let's go through them. Farmhouse, plough, early, famous. With? Famous?
Famous?
Yeah. Would famous do it? Famous farmhouse?
Yeah.
It kind of would, wouldn't it?
Famous farmhouse?
The famous farmhouse.
The famous farmhouse.
That's funny. So wait a minute. What about? So then we've got this word bullocks. Now bullocks are cattle, right? They're a form of steer. The cattle, bullocks. Now can you see one that rhymes with that? Let's go through them. Farmhouse, plough, early, famous, with, black. Black. Can you see the connection between bullocks and black? And so on and so forth. But in any case, so that's a poem that describes the kind of scene I would have seen when I was a kid in Ireland, right? Where there were still farming with horses, believe it or not. There were still horses working the land. So, any other thoughts, queries, questions at all?
So you wrote this poem after having seen farmers plow with horses in Ireland.
Well, I would have seen that as a child. I was brought up after the Second World War, and although there were tractors on the land, gas, or petrol as we call it, was quite hard to find. There was rationing during the war, so there were many horses back in the land. But this poem probably started with an image, I think it might have been a photograph, of two horses standing in a field attached to a plough. And I wondered what the backstory was. what could possibly have happened. So I imagined a backstory for it.
So that's very interesting because I notice it says, the last rig unbroken, his pair of black horses like man and wife, shifting their weight from foot to foot and gazing into the future.
I mean, there is a sense of loss, I'd say, in this poem. A sense of mystery, a sense of loss, and a sadness, I think, that that hangs over it. If one, and there's poems need not necessarily rhyme at all. I'm not someone who would say that poems must rhyme. Absolutely not. Many great poems don't use rhyme at all. But it's because it is something that we recognize and that we actually admire as human beings. We just love that connection between sounds.
It's so incredible, friends, that you can use words to remind you how you felt about something, or what you saw, or what you heard, or how it smelled even. How words can evoke feelings of your five senses. That's very powerful.
Or have you seen?
Yeah. Like I can picture that field that we were just listening to the description of.
Mm-hmm.
Can rhymes be used to make a poem more humorous?
Absolutely. More often than not, rhyme is used in humorous poems. Did I hear someone mention Dr. Seuss? Have you read any Dr. Seuss at all? Yeah. Yeah. So Dr. Seuss is a fabulous poet and a great rhymer. And one of the ways in which he uses it is to humorous effect, right? And in fact, one of the reasons why many modern poets don't use full rhyme is because they're a little concerned about the humor that kind of floats to the surface, the urge to smile that we associate with rhyme, mostly, partly anyway, through someone like Dr. Seuss. And having fun is one of the great impulses in poetry. Some people feel that poetry is a very serious business and there's no room for humor. We don't feel that at all. Yes?
My question was, what is the difference and or similarity between poems and songs?
I'm so glad you brought that up. Poems and songs. Well, first of all, did you hear the question, what's the difference on the similarities between poems and songs? Well, first of all, most songs, not all, but most, use rhyme. Okay? What are your favorite songs these days?
My favorite song is a lot of songs from Descendants, and right now I really like Queen of Mean.
Queen of Mean. What about yourself?
Ronnie?
Mine is Jolene.
Her favorite song is Jolene.
Jolene? What a fabulous song. Dolly Parton? I'm not sure if this is quite the moment. This is a huge topic, but just very briefly, what happened? The poem brings its own music with it, right? It tells you how to read it, just as you guys were reading that poem, telling us how to read it, how to perform it. But the song lyric actually needs something else. It needs, what does the song need that the poem doesn't have?
Oh,
What?
instrument.
An instrument. Music.
My favorite song is Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift, she's very good, isn't she? She's very good. Really great. Yes?
Believer.
Believer. Who does that?
Imagine Dragon. Yeah.
I would love to hear another poem of yours.
Well,
So
okay.
far we've talked about how poems can rhyme, or maybe sometimes they don't rhyme.
Right.
We've talked about how poems can be funny and sometimes very serious or somber, or evoke a feeling of loss, like why Brownlee left. So I'm wondering if we can listen very closely to these words and how they make us feel, and we can talk about it after we listen.
I have a poem in which I myself have tried to use, used the five senses as a way of organizing it. And it's a poem set in New Jersey. Have any of you been to New Jersey? Yeah. What a state. It's got to be one of our favorites, right?
I'm gonna go to New Jersey today,
Fabulous.
and this is my first time.
Is it really? You're going to have a fabulous visit there. One of the things about New Jersey is that there are a lot of old houses in Manhattan, of course, and even Brooklyn. But there are many old houses, and I lived in a house at one point built in 1750. Yes, and when they were building a house in that era, they put a lot of horsehair into the cement in the walls to bind it, to make it strong. So when my wife was doing some home improvements, as she often seemed to be. Have any of you come across a dimmer switch? Do you know a dimmer switch? A dimmer switch is where you've got the electric light, but you can turn it down gradually. That's a dimmer switch. That was a visual aid there, right? That's the dimmer switch. So, and this poem, to go back to that question about the song and the poem, has a little refrain in it, right, which is like a chorus from a song. And maybe you will help me out with this one. If I give you an example of how the chorus goes. This is it. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Stand by. With a pink and a pink and a pinky pick. So on a count of three, can you give me that? 1, 2, 3.
With a pink and a pink and a pinky pink.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, the chorus is always some version of that. Shall we try it again? 1, 2, 3. With a
Pink and a pink and a pinky pink.
excellent. So it's something. It sounds a little bit like that in each case. So let me attempt to read it. Are you ready?
Right.
Yeah.
When I put my finger to the hole, they have cut for a dimmer switch. Which sense is this, would you say? When I put my finger to the hole, is
Touch.
touch?
There you go.
Okay, here we go. When I put my finger to the hole, they've cut for a dimmer switch in a wall of plaster stiffened with horsehair. It seems I've scratched a 200-year-old itch with a pink and a pink and a pinky pick, right? When I put my ear to the hole, I'm suddenly aware of spades and shovels turning up the game, all the way from Raritan to the Delaware, with a clink and a clink and a clinky click. Okay? Each of them has a very particular shape. When I put my nose to the hole, I smell the floodplain off the canal after a hurricane, and the spots of green grass where thousands of Irish have lain, with a stink and a stink and a stinky stick. Good job. When I put my eye to the hole, I see one holding horse dung to the rain, in the hope, indeed, of washing out a few whole ears of grain, with a wink and a wink. And when I do at last succeed in putting my mouth to the horsehair fringed niche. I can taste the small loaf of bread he baked from that whole seed, with a link. What a fan!
Bacon bake rhyme.
Bacon.
Sometimes
Yeah.
you can use nonsense words for
Yeah,
rhymes.
absolutely, absolutely. And this is a nonsense poem. It doesn't make an awful lot of sense. But I want to thank you so much for listening this morning to the poems, and indeed taking part in the poems. Thank you very much indeed. We
Thank you
really
so
appreciate
much.
it. Thank you.
Can we give a round of applause to Mr.
Thank you.
I think that was a wonderful place to end. I really enjoyed being able to notice each of the 5 sentences in each stanza that you were highlighting. So that was wonderful. I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to go back to our classrooms and talk about what we learned today, and maybe even collectively write our own class poem.
That'll be
a great
fabulous.
idea. And we'll share them with you.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
If you ever want to come and visit the studio, you're always welcome.
I would love that sometime. Have you seen?
I've seen Damien, I've seen our dear friend.
Where did you see him?